If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button as well as the bell to be notified of future videos. Thank you.
Hello Internet, I must tell you, I'm looking forward to this episode and so should you. We have a remarkable man here in front of us. It is Gareth Rutherford. Now I really hope I say that proper English name correctly. Gareth, you've been waiting months to come on the show. You were a Norris Crooks holder. You got it during a Smokeshell. Remarkable story of your life, not only the medal, but also your life afterwards. So welcome here. Thank you for coming to us. We really appreciate it. We appreciate your time. And now it's over to you. Can you tell me, how did you get into the army? What happened?
Well, it's my privilege to be here and to participate in this legacy and to contribute, to offer my contribution. Well, I was like most of us young soldiers, after school, mustered into the army in Bloemfontein. I would have chosen to go to the Navy, like my brothers, or many of my friends to the Air Force, but I had to follow orders. And at the Cape Town Castle, where I was dropped off by my dad, we were shuttled across from the castle in Bedford to the station. It's a very common story from many of my contemporaries. And we got onto the train, you know the whole story, and the corporals were shouting. It wasn't a huge event in our young schoolboy lives, getting onto that train. And that day at the army, when you came across these bloody corporals that were shouting and screaming and doing real army stuff, it wasn't quite a shock. We were sort of ready for it, but it was a huge shock. And off we went, got onto the train. A steam train, actually, I might add, Puffing Billy. And it was fun. It was, every one of us were apprehensive because it was the first long trip away from home, away from mommy and dad. But it was exciting because I wasn't alone. I had friends with me, friends from school and friends from the neighborhood. There were so many of us. And it was a journey into a new phase of our life that we hadn't yet realized. We hadn't realized how much of a change of life this was going to be. Let me get a bit closer. We got to Bloemfontein, and of course, we were mustered into, I was mustered into one side, which is in Tempe. And there were thousands and thousands of us over the years that did the exact same thing as I did. So I'm not talking about me here. I'm talking about so many of us that went through this exact procedure, sitting in that long queue, waiting for a haircut. That was a big shock. And the second one was realizing how long a queue can take. I'd never, ever in my life sat in a queue that took 4 or 5 hours just sitting doing nothing. I'd never, ever had the time to waste, such time to waste. Anyway, we had our medicals, as you see in some of the movies, all the young boys standing in their underpants waiting for the doctor. It was an adventure. It was something that we all had to do. It was something that we didn't have much choice about, and we had resigned ourselves as young soldiers, as young schoolboys, actually, to participate in this operation of defending our families, our culture, and our country. And to do that, it required a sacrifice. And many before us had been well conditioned, like us, to give the sacrifice, to make the sacrifice, which was to leave home, get into army uniform, do the training, and go to the border. And this was what happened to me, like everybody else. I would have loved to have avoided it. I would have loved to have skipped off to varsity and then evaded call-up somehow. It would have been great. But there was an allegiance, there was a loyalty, and there was I wouldn't call it conditioning or brainwashing, but there was an accepted norm amongst us who really cared for the culture and the country and the nation as it stood then, even in its disintegrating form, before apartheid went away and while we were still under extreme pressure from the world's envy. They envied us. We had it good here. Not just whites, but everybody. Our country was incredibly well developed, and it took sacrifice. It took effort. It took a great many lives. It took passion. And I was part of all of that. All of us who were there were part of that passion and that sacrifice. And that is what we're talking about today as legacy. Legacy today is what we leave behind when we go, when we die. Legacy can be good or bad, but in this case, and in our cases, we would choose to leave something great for our sons and daughters. And whether it's a story or money or property or just a great memories, this legacy is a very important part of being human. And we did that. Our soldiers and our schoolboys that turned into soldiers contributed to this legacy, a great legacy of our nation and of our history. And that's what I wanted to share with you today. That's what I wanted to talk about, is how we fitted in to your program of legacy. So yes, like everyone else, I did my training. It was extremely rigorous. I look at the movies of American SEALs and even our special forces or our parabats, and I see how hard they trained. We watched while we were slogging away with poles on our shoulders out in the Kooikamp in Bloemfontein in freezing sub-zero conditions. And we saw the parabats doing their thing up on their hill. And however hard it was for us, or however hard it was for the parabats that we saw slogging away, you can only do so much as young boys, running and training and being I wouldn't say brainwashed again, but being conditioned for facing an enemy at war. And in order to face an enemy that was savage, that was well equipped, an enemy that was very dangerous, we had to endure the most intense rigors. And this was the message communicated to us as young trainees by some very astute, passionate leader groups. Our commandants and colonels and majors and whatever, you know, the officers and non-commissioned officers, of course, in one side, drove us to absolute extremes. And I'm really proud that I was part of that. I'm really proud to have been with guys who were far better and faster and more orientated, better orientated than me. I wouldn't ever say I was slack. I was in the front of all those running groups as much as I possibly could. But I was just a normal guy like everyone else. And I can say very, very comfortably that I could be regarded as a very good general case of how we progressed from schoolboys through training into soldiers. And then through these very intense events to have achieved another level of greatness. Every single one of us, you know, we can look back and say how damaged we were. There were many of us that were very damaged and very physically and mentally damaged. But we exchanged something for this sacrifice. As I mentioned earlier, I said to you, there had to be sacrifices in order to achieve a legacy, a good legacy, a worthy legacy. There have to be sacrifices and great effort. And that's what we did. I'm really proud to say that. You know, a lot of people detracted from what we did, saying that our efforts in the military were for nothing, or our efforts in the military were futile, or our efforts in the military were wasted money and effort, all for an apartheid government or delinquent political leaders. But they weren't. We look at it now and we can say, in hindsight here, not in smug knowledge, but we can say with confidence that whatever it was that we did together, black, white, green, all of us, the entire nation, we really did our nation proud in achieving a unity. Even with the apartheid, that was going in its way, and it would have gone regardless of how hard the terrorist, well, I don't want to call them terrorists, the activist groups were working against us. It would have gone. Would have gone anyway. It had to have a little push, and I agree, it was a good thing. But we were part I wouldn't say a delaying process, but a protective mechanism. Our training and our presence in this conflict was not that we didn't know what was going on. We knew. And part of our training, one of the loudest training slogans was, if you don't look after yourself, they will kill you. If you don't do this, your family will suffer. If we were not there, we would all lose. So it was a difficult thing for us to relate to, coming from our stable, comfortable, relatively protected school environments, to walk into this area where they were telling us we were at war and there were people that were going to kill us or our families if we didn't do what we were doing. So we went out there with great motivation. We had good reason to be there, and we had good reason to do that rigorous training. When we were slacking off and when we were suffering, and we suffered a lot. Our leader groups explained, they said, if you don't do this, if you don't suffer here now, you'll die. You'll die there. And it wasn't maybe said in those words, but it was a clear message that we had a very serious project, a very serious goal, and a very serious what would you call it? Project. We were part of a very serious event in our history. And that was the protection of our families and the nation. And much as I didn't understand what was going on politically, we knew that there was a threat, and we knew that the inevitable, we were going to go to war. We'd seen all our contemporaries before us going up onto the border, and we'd heard all the stories, but we never heard the bad stuff, really. We heard about the victory, and the conditioning was very good. So by the time we had got up to the border, it was an adventure. It was exciting. There were a couple of scary times, but generally we had such a comprehensive, well-organized structure and discipline that no matter how dangerous or how many of the enemy were there, we were dominant. And it was great to be part of that. You know, driving around in these huge rattles. It was huge. We couldn't comprehend that there was an enemy that would be much of a threat to us, which was a huge shock because it did change very quickly in the years after Smokeshell. As the enemy intensified and the Russian, Cuban, American even, the Western influences, Norway and Sweden, invested huge amounts of cash funding for the so-called enemy. And of course, we faltered and had to step back. I wouldn't say we lost, and there was still an ongoing dispute, you know about this. But we were compelled to step down. And it was a sad concession, you know. I fortunately was in the earlier times where there was no talk of failure or loss. There was only victory, and it was only dominance. You know, we were good, and the world hadn't yet come to bear with its full force on us during Smokeshell. So that's all I can actually face and talk about. Of course, I did my camps and I did various operations after Smokeshell, but never with the intensity or the application, the focus, and the all-consuming effort that we had in Smokeshell. The other thing was that on this project, this operation Smokeshell, none of us knew, none of us had any idea what we were going to be facing. I'm even getting uncomfortable in my chair mentioning this. It was, you know, we were so well conditioned in a good way, motivated. I wouldn't say conditioned, let's say motivated, because we'd done all this hard work with the right kind of political indoctrination. And it was, for the time, looking back at it now, I still think it was good what they did. The alternative would have been negative, would have caused far more negative repercussions. And many people who chose not to participate were able to leave the country, and our blessings were with them. There was a couple of little snide comments here and there, but they had their reasons and we had nothing against them. But those of us that stayed and those of us that did that stuff today look back and say, yeah, we did a hell of a good job and we saved a hell of a lot. We saved the revolution. We saved the revolution that we have now. Is only a fraction of what it would have been if we hadn't been there to moderate and to slow the process. And I think we gave the politicians time. The lives that were lost, those brave soldiers, brave young men, who sacrificed their lives, or who were sacrificed by us, form part of the legacy that we wanted to leave behind. And it's a very important thing that those soldiers who died, and there were many of our young contemporaries who died for this sacrifice of peace, unity, and political complacency, political stability. That's all we wanted. Everybody wants the same thing, whatever the color were. Apartheid was on its way out anyway, regardless. And opportunities for everybody the playing fields were being leveled. So the onslaught continued, regardless of how hard or how many sacrifices we made. The onslaught from the West and from Russia and whoever else had interests in Africa intensified, and we were the only comprehensive force in place to counter it. I had a letter. I must, maybe I'll read this letter later to you. I would like to share something with you because it was part of my life's formation. The formation or the direction of my life was this Smokeshell event, not because of the awards or the medals, but because of the lessons we all learned, the lessons we shared, and the lessons that we took from it. And the legacy that we left after Smokeshell, it was significant. They tried to erase it. They tried to forget about it. Even my school didn't mention it because it was taboo. You know, it was apartheid government, soldiers trying to keep the apartheid regime afloat, which it wasn't, not by any means. It was soldiers. It was an effort, as I said earlier, to moderate the onslaught and the drastic changes that needed to take place, step by step, slowly and carefully, which I think they succeeded to do. Thank you to terrorist Mandela, or whatever his name is. Nelson Mandela did a very, very good thing. And we are very grateful that he did not take revenge. He moderated, and much to our relief, worked together with the apartheid regime and us. We were part of that moderation, and I'm really proud of that. But the sacrifices made remain. Those young men, not just those young men that died, that's one thing on its own and sad and horrific. It's the story of war globally since the beginning of time. But the sacrifices made by every one of us who were not just taken for 2 years, national service and all the camps that we did afterwards, but whose lives were completely sidetracked, diverted, and severely, or in many ways, affected by our military application. So anyway, I don't want to go on too long. One of the things that happened was, as many of you know, the Smokeshell story. I've watched a few of my contemporaries discussing the details of Smokeshell, and it's a well-told and well-documented event now. But there are details that are so unique that they need to be expressed here. You know, there's so much that we can be proud of. The bravery of these young men that should not ever be forgotten. You know, it's their legacy. And I felt it ever since I started to explain and express and to share these experiences, it was my responsibility to communicate these great, brave men, what they did. Present a legacy for them, because nobody would know. Nobody would ever know what these guys did. And here I have with me, I must show you. This is all it is now. It's pieces of paper. It's disintegrated because a few various authors have taken this diary that was with me in Smokeshell. And I can't really show it to you here. It doesn't come very clear. But it's the authentic, what would I say? We didn't have smartphones in those days or anything, or cameras that we could snap away photographs with like we do today. This is what we had. And there was another guy who also in my section who also wrote a journal. But this was fascinating because it outlined everything we did in a language that I would be a bit embarrassed to share with you today, because, you know, as a 19 or 20-year-old, we used to speak in a different way. We had a different kind of slang, and we used terms that we wouldn't dream of using today. So this is unchanged and it's authentic. And it's been transcribed many times, and excerpts of it have been printed and published in various books like Willem Steenkamp and Ian Ace and Dr. Ad van Wyk that I can mention. There are others, and they've taken sections and paragraphs out of here which correspond to the stories or the adventures or the tragedies that they have recorded in their accounts. Not of Smokeshell, but of these many lives, these many great young men who made their sacrifices, some dying and some just suffering, or some just growing. Most important thing, and one of the most important aspects of this is the suffering of the families, not just of those that died, but those that were affected. You know, the sacrifice that I'm talking about is huge. It was the same for the First and the Second World War for our grandparents. They went off as 15, 16, 17-year-olds, just like us, with uniforms, too ill-fitting uniforms, and not ever knowing where they were going to get their next meal from. Shoveled onto trains and sent into other countries to do hell knows what, with the guns, with rifles in their hands. And thousands upon thousands, tens of thousands, millions died. We were lucky. We had it easy. It's the families left behind that really had the pain and the suffering. I had a letter from one of the mothers who I visited. I was very fortunate to be able to get it together. I'm even getting goosebumps thinking about this. I was very lucky and fortunate to be able to go and see one of the mothers of a chap who died literally under my hands on the battlefront of Smokeshell, Peter Warrener. And Sheila, his mum, wrote to me, "Dear Gareth, I'm writing to you to tell you that by chance, my daughter found the book Honoris Crux in Stellenbosch, and she gave it to me for Mother's Day. It really was a gift to fit the occasion." This is a mother who's lost her son out there with us. And the pain and the damage done to those families left behind never recedes. And we can go on, we can leave the army and we can go on with our lives. But those that have lost their young ones are permanently, I wouldn't say disfigured, but permanently agonized. Although the events that took place at Smokeshell are printed deeply and clearly in my mind, the one gap was what you did. And if my little son Peter realized you were there to help him and to comfort him. This is a very important part of Smokeshell and our training and what happened. You know, having medics on site was sort of not really done very well in those times, in the earlier operations. Later on, they got what they called operations medic, ops medics. And actually, that's what I was. I was an ops medic. And one of the most important things that I did there was to be reassuring and to be with these young men as they were suffering, and to be in a position to have not just reassured them, but medically patch them up, tourniquets, attend to them and get them ready to move to Cassavac, which is what I did. That goes without saying, but the most important part of this thing was just being there, because being on a battlefield with bullets flying, and it was crazy, it was scary. There are many who have had far worse and far more terrifying and far more intense situations. But this was what struck me so much here, was that I could be with them while they died. I could be there holding their hand, praying with them, and that they weren't alone. Because one of the worst things that happened on Smokeshell was a story that is not for today, but one of our guys died alone, and it was a great tragedy, and it cut into my heart and my soul forever. An agony that only a few of us know about, and an agony that we've kept to ourselves, because the damage that it would do at this stage to those families would not be really fair to share. We let this sleeping dog lie. But I need to explain to you here that one of the most important things that I ever did in my life was just to be there with them under fire, and not to desert them or leave them to die alone. And it was natural. Any one of us would have done the same. Or if they didn't, I was forced to. There was no place to run. Going back meant the enemies, meant we'd be hit by our own fire. And going forward, there were enemies there. Going sideways, there was just fire. And going the opposite way, who knows what? It was, we were compelled to consolidate, remain, defend, and in my case, to attend to casualties. So if I'd had a chance to run, I would have been gone. But it did happen. There were a few of us that actually did. They dropped their rifles, their helmets were off, they ran. They just followed the trails, the wheel tracks, and they ran until they found other vehicles and other people to help them. And that was the right thing to do. But it was a demonstration or an example of the confusion, the fear, the absolute terror that comes down on a battlefield everywhere, not just with us. This is from time immemorial. In every single operation, you have these confusions and this intense fire and movement, conflict. And you get some very brave stories, of course. You'll get lots of those. And you'll get some interesting stories about how people endure or survive or retaliate. But in my case, I was compelled by the situation to attend to those that were dying. And I'm so grateful that it was me that was there. And I'm so grateful that I had the training, that my trainers had the good sense to send me on course. And I thanked them. I didn't take the credit for this stuff. I put my life, I said my life was saved by my trainers. And I named them. All the suffering and the mistreatment and the shouting and the screaming and the rigorous training that they put us through saved our lives. And I give them credit for having saved so many lives by their discipline and by what they did, what they gave to us, how they trained us, because I knew exactly what to do. In all this confusion, I was doing exactly the right thing. And I was seen. Somebody saw me do it. A few people saw me, actually. And so today, 40 or 50 years, I don't know how many years now, 40 years later, it took me a long time to realize that actually, credit to them. We only survived because we had such good training. There would have been a lot more of us gone if it wasn't for that. So poor Sheila Wright, the mum here, who wrote this letter, was so gratified after I was able to go and sit with them. Went out for a burger and cool drink. And I explained to them, I said, I was with your boy. I spoke to him. And he was brave. And he died. He died with me, with us. And there was no pain. There was no agony. He had his legs were off. But he was so accepting of the situation. And that's what the mom wanted to know. How was he when he died? Did he know that he was in good hands? Did he know that he may get to a hospital? He had hope. None of those boys that I was with thought they were actually going to die. They thought they might go unconscious or whatever, and we'd get to the hospital and, death was just out of the question. But it happened. Our Cassavac didn't come, and the golden hours went by. And no matter how many of those lives that I saved, and I did, for the golden hour, how much more, how much longer could I have done that? I couldn't. And the ambulance, the Cassavac, never came, and we stayed there on the site, and they died. And I blamed myself. For years, as a young kid, I blamed myself because I felt that I hadn't done enough. But I did. I did just the right thing, and more than I could have ever done. My doctor, who trained me, who was actually at the same school as me, a couple of years above me, Dr. James Gibson, came to Amatea afterwards, and he said, he briefed me or debriefed me because I was shattered. I was absolutely devastated, feeling totally inadequate because I felt that I hadn't done enough. And as these guys, one by one, slipped into death, I blamed myself, which was completely wrong. It was absolute, a great sadness. Fortunately, I did have some people to explain and say, hey, this is not you or your fault. And no matter how little you could have done or not have done, these guys were going to die anyway. So anyway, as I say, I was very glad, very grateful to have been able to see this mom, visit her on a few occasions, and to put their whole family at ease, and to let them know that their boy was not just that he died easily and without pain or agony, but bravely, really, really brave. And all of them, every single one of them. I wrote something which I must share with you. It's called David Lotter, who you probably know, David Lotter. And we were discussing a fear far worse than death. Death alone was dying alone. And what it's like to be shot, impacted by shrapnel or bullets. And Here I write to David, who is, as you know, an honored veteran, an esteemed poet and author, and a facet of my response to your clear and vivid images on recent posts. I'm not as well experienced as you by far, but still remember the same dilemmas that have confronted all of us as soldiers. Me then, just a little Lance Jack, section medic. I'm editing as I'm reading, sorry. The fear of death itself is something else. It was something less realistic then to us young boys, I think. As I mentioned earlier, the fear of death, there was no talk of death. We were going on ops, and people don't die on ops. We had no idea. I think quick, final, and there were a few options, except maybe dying alone. Now there is one I saw. And today, this is another story. Sorry, I'm confusing you here. I mentioned to you there was one event where one of our guys went off, was shot as he exited the rattle, and he ended up in a trench in a terrorist bunker. And the battle raged around, and there was no chance that he could get medical attention, and he bled to death. But it took a long time. And he was in this trench and he stayed there, and we left that night, and he was left in the trench that night on the target with these terrorists still all over in the trees. It was terrifying. We found him the next morning. He was still warm when we went back, which meant that he'd taken all night to die. And so it's a terrible story, and we can relate this next time, but I'm just saying that there are these events of great sadness. To die alone was one of the greatest fears. I've written here, I wanted to share the constant, so random. Oh yes, I was talking about being shot, or what happened to these young men is in various cases, and it will be corroborated by a number of my close colleagues in the sections and the platoons where I was with, that they were impacted by various ordnance, bullets, hand grenades, RPGs, and shrapnel of various sorts. What happens before such combat situations is the part that burns deeply into those of us who have been so close to it and dodged it. It seems obscure. Seen the side of its face in an instant and ducked away out of its random clutching reach. The bullet, the shrapnel. The choices we make, the training we've had, the weapons and equipment, our comrades, all have direct bearing on the life and death on this target, on this battle zone. But the bullet, its shrapnel, is so random. It could come to anywhere from any direction, and you could collect it, get it, or not. The constant expectation of being taken by that spinning metal projectile. We were aware of it. I kept my helmet on. A lot of the guys had bush hats. A lot of the guys were completely oblivious of the danger. I was scared. I kept my head down below that hatch and shot through the skietgat there on the side of the vehicle. I was careful. The constant expectation of being taken by that speeding, spinning metal projectile, the savage, numbing thud, and its impact as its kinetic energy transfer into your flesh, a pulp of fragments or death. The most incredible damage gets done by the tiniest piece of shrapnel. It is such vicious stuff. When a bullet starts to ricochet around the inside of that armored vehicle, it is absolutely random and nothing stops it. No flesh stops it. Breathless and winded and suffocating, you glance down to where your webbing once covered your stomach to see vapor, dust, and blood, and the numbness. No pain. Or perhaps, like a couple of these guys, your legs gone completely and shredded. Shredded, battle fatigue, soaked in blood. You're lying on the ground. Everything's gone. And the smell of singed hair, the same dust and your fresh blood. And yet, even as the whole world is tilted sideways, still a hope and trust in knowing that your comrades won't leave you, that they will fix you, the medics, the doctors, and the great hospitals. Frightened more, alone now, they've all gone as the afternoon sun settles low. You can't feel your legs, flies in your face, in your eyes. Only minutes pass, and sand in your mouth. You lie still no pain, and then the sounds of voices. I hadn't yet got to him. He was still lying there on the ground, waiting for somebody to come. Gentle words and hands deftly bandaging. No longer alone now. Safe. Reassurance and relief and hope. Consoling the terror. Washed away in floods of adrenaline. All too soon, embers of hope seep away, lying in the lee of the vehicle as the flies feast and swarm. There were flies in this wounds. It was quite awful. I'm explaining this because you need to know, because this is what happened to these young men making this sacrifice. And how brave they were to have endured this. A hand in yours. As waves of pain sweep through your ebbing hope. Futile tourniquets, no matter what I did, Sosagon tourniquets, I even tried putting drips in. Morphine and ineffective saline drips. The rescue was too late. The light grows dim, and a prayer at last, and a brave knowing smile, and closing dry hot eyes, and so forever in peace. I watched the life go out of these eyes over and over. And it was so hard because I didn't know what it was at first. I didn't realize it or recognize it or realize how real this was, because it was almost surreal, you know. This was part of the Operation Smokeshell that I witnessed. And those young men who waited so long for the ambulance or casevac or helicopter and died under my care, but with their hands in mine, gently. So I said to this guy, David Lotter, this is a tiny bit of what your poems and his writing ignites in me. And by sharing this with others who've been there, or with others who relate to this sacrifice, these events, it leaves a legacy of bravery. It leaves a legacy of great achievement, and it changes the shock and the waste and the loss that these families and their sons and daughters have lost. And by sharing these events so in such detail, it builds their legacy. And I think that's what we owe them. We owe them more than just the name carved in the stone. You know, we've got those stone plaques with all their names in forever. But those stone plaques will go. Our legacy and the legacy we give them here will be forever. The legacy I've given them here in this diary is such a great accolade. And I'm really proud that they chose me to do this. So I came back from the operation. That's what we looked like. Me with the sunglasses and my friend Gavin, my best friend from school. And we just took that quick snapshot. And that's with smiles on our faces, I would say, not of bravado, but of great relief that we were still alive and uninjured. So a different place, different time, same blood, brave young men. It's the same in the Bible, over and over, far worse then than now, as I said earlier. We never learn. We humans won't change. Right now in Ukraine, it's happening again. So that was really all I wanted to share with you, was the trauma of dying alone and the great blessing it is to have had support, witnesses, and hope. You know, if that's the only thing that I ever did on Smokeshell, it was to give them that little bit of hope, and that they didn't have to die like the one chap that I mentioned earlier, so tragically in a terrorist trench alone. I've never been so terrified of anything in my life. And I've had a long life, and I've had lots of stuff, scary stuff, but I've never, ever been so scared as being behind enemy lines in the middle of the night when I had to go out on advanced guard post. What do they call it? I'd be scared as I, this is, as I was behind enemy lines in Angola. But I was still with a huge force of fellow soldiers. I was never alone, you know, and that's how scared I was. So imagine what it's like to be alone on an enemy site, still living, bleeding to death, and everybody's gone. I'm smiling here. It's not because I'm smiling. I'm just most severely affected by the recollection that our guys made these sacrifices. And I'm so glad. The reason why I smile today is because they will have their legacy here, and whatever horror in their sacrifice will not be swept under the carpet forever. It will be part of this history, and it will be part of a great pride that we can share how brave they were, because they deserved that. You know, much as I stood there on that parade ground, yes, you must see, where is it now? I stood on a parade ground for such a great honor. And I must show you this photo. I read it last night. There was a whole lot of us. It was a huge parade, and I've got this cutting. My dad took this cutting. You can't see it very well, but there's me with the Honoris Crux flag behind me. It's a huge banner, but on my face, and I look at this, and it says, Lance Corporal G.T. Rutherford looks pensive after receiving his Honoris Crux. There was no place for smiling here. There was massive pride and honor in this, but it was not a pride to smile. And I never smiled once. I couldn't, because there were all those parents whose sons had died. And here I was, receiving such an accolade as the sons lay dead. And for me, it was a huge guilt. For many years, I had the survivor guilt, which is a common malaise that everyone knows about. And as the years went by, and as I came to terms with the events and listened and read very carefully of the accounts from the others, by the others, all compiled into a very comprehensive history that we now have. And I looked at what had happened, how brave these young men were. And the fact that I was given a medal was a good thing. Not for me, but because I was able, because of the role I played, the role I was able to play, because of the training that I had, and because I was in the right place at the right time, seen by the right people, and doing the right thing. And that might not be something that happens very often with me today, but it was on that day. And I'm so grateful that I was there and it was me doing that. So our young soldiers, many of them alive today, alive and well, some of them most seriously still injured and suffering. Some of them so bravely undergoing ongoing medical operations, procedures, and so bravely persevering. There is bravery here that I cannot explain. There is no medal or military parade that could reward them for even a fraction of the suffering and the sacrifice. And there are many of them now, some legless, armless, in American, British armies all over the world, and lots of our contemporaries from South Africa. And from my very platoon today, veterans who live today with most serious injuries, some not so serious, but some psychological. It's not been an easy trail, and their bravery has also been recognized. Never enough, of course, but that's why I'm glad that I'm here today. I'm very grateful to be here to give them the applause and the accolade and the honor that they deserve, far more than any medal that I could have been awarded. So we got on with our lives. And we never forgot them. I attend various, wherever possible, veteran gatherings, honoring those that have passed away, those that were part of this intensive, long-term project of maintaining some kind of protection, defense, or integrity of our nation. And we're all proud of that. There are a few that would disagree and say that every life lost was wasted. But I really think that those sacrifices were only a few, were only even one's too many. You know, the amount of sacrifice, the amount of loss that we had was so much less because of our comprehensive training and our unity. We had a great unity. And we still do in many ways. We have a great unity. We've tried building on it, and we've tried improving it nationally. But what really kept us in one piece, kept us together and saved many lives was our unity, our combined resources. Anyway, I don't want to go on too long. Finding these words, finding the correct words is very important. You know, using the wrong words will only confuse matters more. And using the right words in these explanations and interpretations is absolutely essential. And I think today I've managed to use the right words. And I hope that my colleagues, my contemporaries, my comrades, my leader group are esteemed officers and trainers take cognizance of our gratitude as frontline soldiers for their intense and comprehensive training. We really saved lives. They really saved lives. And we're here today. We're here today because of it. I'm here today because of great trainers and the unity that we had those years. What else? What else do we need to talk about? I've got so much stuff here, but I think I've covered the main issues that I wanted to share. On topic with the subject of legacy. I have a legacy, a bad legacy in some places, but I have a great legacy, I think. I've been afforded an opportunity to present this story of these great men and myself with them. I'm honored to have been with these great men. I'm honored to have been able to have stood on this parade ground with how many, 18 or 17 of these other great, brave men. And to have been able to share this with you. And to have a legacy with them that we can share as a country and as an entire generation. So thank you, Koos. Thank you. Are there any other questions that you might wanted to address?
Well, Gareth, I will make a statement first, and I can tell you that, in my opinion, this is one of the greatest episodes ever on Legacy. And I thank you for that. You know, there's a lot of things I see in you which I think is the stuff of heroes and of poets. And I know people are going to ask, that diary of yours, can you not make it in a form of book and make it available for people to read that they understand war? You say to me that we keep on making the same mistakes. Of course we do, we're human, we're stupid. But perhaps somebody can read that diary of yours, listen to this story and understand what war will bring.
It's been done. It was typed out most beautifully by my mom long ago. And word for word, actually. And I mentioned to you that I was a bit embarrassed by the language we used, or the language I used in those days, the slang. But it is so authentic. It's word for word, exactly typed out here. And all those different authors had copies of this, and they've used them, and they've they've extracted little pieces that they find most relevant. And it contains a great what's the word? Intense reality, on the moment, actually stuff that, as I say, no, you don't have to be a soldier, or you don't have to have been here to relate to this stuff. It's just so human. Because there were no fancy word tricks. There was just a young boy writing down what he was seeing, what he was doing, and what was happening. And in itself, it's a good story, but the time frames and the have to be adjusted for it to make more sense to an outsider. You understand what I'm saying? The time of writing varies from right there and then to 3 or 4 days after, you know, and this jumping back and forward can be quite a confusing thing for any reader. So in its untouched form, it's here. I think it would be a good idea to compile it into a more coherent, chronologically adjusted story that would be easy to understand and very powerful for those that have been there, you know, in any conflict, whether you were in Iraq or Afghanistan or more recently, or even Ukraine. Some of them are going down there now. But yeah, we've got it. We've got it all written. And you know, thanks to this little piece of scrap diary, we have such good detail. I'm not the only one, as I say, to have written diaries and to have these moments of the past. There are others, and I've been very glad to see that they've contributed their little pieces, and it all fits in. It's been meticulously assembled by some very clever, passionate historians like David Lotter and Ut van Wyk and Willem Steenkamp and Ian Ace and others that are here. Then I must just mention this one lady. I came across this one, A Secret Burden by Karen Batley, which has got a photograph of a rattle on the front cover. Somebody gave this to me recently. And it's a whole compilation of poetry inspired by much suffering and sacrifice, as I mentioned here before. And it's a book full of poems. For example, Final Cassavac. Too young to die, we stood and watched. Too shocked to cry. The bright and spreading stain of oozing life fell, drop for drop, into the hot Angolan dust. Now, where that came from, I don't know. But it's in this book. That's just an example of the many agonies that we young boys had to endure, and the families connected, and today in every war conflict, it's the same. The sadnesses are something that we can all relate to. And this is a very important part in relaying these messages, is that we have commonality. This is not just my story. You mentioned this, oh, this is your story. This is far bigger than me. It's a wonderful opportunity to share our story, because it goes far more than just my heart. It goes out into everybody's heart. If it's told right, if it's explained right, and if like I said earlier, we use the right words, it eases the pain. It heals. And one of the most important parts of this story is that it's part of the healing process. The damage and the agony and the suffering and the sacrifice are on the one side. But on the other side, there's healing. There is wisdom and growth and healing. We have to come to terms with what's happened, and we have to, in our own ways, each of us, repair our damage, overcome our pain. And that's what I've done. I've done it. It'll never be perfect, but that's life. That's the way we have to. That's the way we grow. And true growth, that's really worthwhile, comes most from suffering, I think. From suffering, pain, and discomfort. That's another story. If we talk about jail, one of the biggest places I ever grew, one of the places where I grew most was in an Arab jail. And that's another story, another huge story. It's a fantastic story of growth and perseverance and agony and sadness, loss, but victory. Great victory in the end. Challenges that were overcome. And without these challenges, there's no growth. So I am today grateful for the situations that came my way and the way that I had so much support, encouragement, and friends. We need them. And I would have been dead without my friends. Literally, I would not be here without the support and the love and the encouragement that I've had from my friends. Family is one thing, but the friends are absolutely vital component in our healing and our recovery, all of us. And I'm proud to say that I have the best friends in the world amongst my quiver. And I'm here because of them. I'm here today because of them, that's for sure. And I'm sure it's the same for all of us, to more or less a degree, that our friends and how precious our friends becomes more apparent as we get older. Some friends come and go, but they're always there, you know. And I'm so grateful for mine. Anyway, I'm quite impressed with the way our internet has been cooperating.
Yes, I was quite surprised
Wow.
because in the beginning I was quite worried. But I want to say to the viewers, this is not the end of Gareth and Legacy. Of course, we're going to talk to him again if he agrees, and I'm sure he will.
Yes, please.
But Gareth, I have to ask you, why did the choppers not arrive that day? Why did you lose the golden hour? You did everything you could as an ops medic. You did your duty. You kept them alive. But the system somehow failed. What happened?
You know, there was such a lot of blame going on there, and none of it was justified. There was a huge logistical operation, and some of them said, "Oh, the choppers didn't have fuel," and there was blame everywhere, and we can't actually, on such a complex confusion, and this was like every battle situation. It's a confusion. I read just recently that the strategy of war, the best strategy of war, is to be able to confuse your enemy. And we did that to them, but why did they ever do it to us as well? So, yeah, the confusion on our target, Dulvit, what do you want to call it, battle zone, was intentional. And no matter, it's like a big chess game, no matter which way you move, it's very difficult for any one or two people to make the right decisions perfectly every time. It's not going to happen. And the fault with us was that we were under fire. We were under constant fire. Enemy had anticipated where we were coming from, and they had gone to higher ground where they had, and this will be corroborated by others now that have read and comprehended the entire situation, that our enemy knew exactly where we were and where we would come. They were up in the trees, and they were well camouflaged. They had dummy gun positions, which had confused us completely. Our main fighting force went off onto a completely false target. And we, who were in the secondary fighting force, walked right into the teeth. This is a well-documented story, and I think it was a huge lesson to us as mechanized infantry, and to, the entire South African Defence Force. We got a huge shock. It was an excellent strategy, and it worked. It confused us no end. And it resulted in the fact that we were pinned down. As I said, there were bullets hitting the top of these vehicles. We were in a little bit of a ditch, and I was attending these dying soldiers as they lay along the side of the vehicle. And dying in the sun. And the bullets were hitting the top of the vehicle all the time. So there was no way. I was scuttling from pillar to post, keeping my head down because there was some terrorist in the distance, possibly as much as 300 meters, maybe half a kilo away, blindly shooting. And none of our response forces were able to pinpoint him. And so for the entire time that these guys were lying there dying, there were bullets flying. The other forces, the other companies were doing mopping up, and they had also confused into different directions. We had no GPS. There was also no visibility because of the trees. It was incredibly confusing. And the only people that could give us some kind of direction up there was the Bosbok airplane, which had also been scared off by anti-aircraft fire. So we were blind. And the confusion was like little circles. And with all the enemy fire, this is another rather painful issue, that there were deaths by own fire. We don't talk about this too much because there's no proof or evidence of it, but the confusion was so complete that there was no way ambulance could come. The medics and the doctors were all safely behind lines, which is correct. But where we needed them on the front, there was only me. The only other guy, our platoon medic, was shot and was in the trench. I told you about him earlier. And that was a great tragedy. Another very brave man and an excellent medic. He and I used to go on course together to Tempe Hospital, where we would go and get lunch and cakes and a lecture if we were lucky. And he died very sadly there. Let's not go into that side of it. There was a huge confusion and there was no way that any helicopter would come near. And the leader group saw that we were pinned down. The leader group saw 4 plumes of black smoke, and they weren't going to come near us. I better not talk too badly of this because they were wise not to come charging down into our midst, because they didn't know they didn't even know which rattles were burning. It was absolute devastation, disaster. And our company commander, who's now dead, who died in one of the subsequent operations, very bravely, I might say, he wouldn't come in. And he forbade. There were guys that were saying, well, I will go and get them. I will go and rescue them. And he said, stand fast. He said, don't go in there. So there we were, sitting pinned down with bullets and stuff flying over our heads as these terrorists or protectors of their own base, the enemy, the last remnants of them were defending their place and taking pot shots at us. There was no way anyone was going to come in there. And so it waited and it waited and it waited. And in the end, Holtzhausen or somebody, I can't remember the name, but some outside high rank came charging in with a little notebook and with no rifle. I can't remember who it was, but he assessed the situation, checked it out, and he said, get this bodies loaded up, get these people loaded up, move out. Within 10 minutes, after lying there for 3.5 hours in the sun while everyone was dying, within 10 minutes, we put all the pieces of the bodies up into the rottle. I have one rottle out there. I don't know where our driver disappeared. He went to drive another rottle from the other side of the target area. And it was a huge confusion. So there can be no blame here for fuel or whatever excuses they tried to make. It was the situation. And it was an unpredictable, completely unpredictable event. And we were very lucky to have had only 13 people die there. Had our training not been adequate, had our machines, our equipment not been well maintained, we would have had a far higher death rate. I think we were very, very blessed only to lose 13 there. We should have lost 30 or 40. And I was one that escaped. I was one where there were dead bodies on all sides of me, and I was untouched. Actually, I think, which finger? This finger. I got a splinter in this finger because I had my hand on the aerial while we were driving. That was my only injury, and it was sore. But the pain disappeared quickly when I saw those pieces of my friends. And I used it as the pain in my finger as a consolation that that's all I had. Not a hair on my head harmed. And to have observed, lived coherently, seen everything that happened, and to have been able to collate it here, assemble it in my diary, get it written down. Even as we were driving, I was writing. Not as good as a smartphone or how we do with our cameras every day. But in those days, I think the authenticity of that writing, and you must see, let me just show you something quickly. Where is it? Can't find it now. But the paper, the pages are all still full of, some have got some blood on them, and some have got all the mud and the dust from the grubby little hands. It's so authentic. And it's the component that makes this legacy so much more precious. A precious legacy that we need to preserve and that we need to share, and that we can find all commonality in. And I'm so glad that I had the opportunity, not just here, but in many cases, as I said before, to have had the opportunity to do some presentations to different groups and to have written this all down. Well, my mom's typing. She typed it all many years ago. Not sure. Oh, here's actually a separate story about that medic, that medic I've just found. So, sorry to go around and around in circles like this, but it was just like those times. There is so much in this story that I want to share and tell you in such a little time, that anytime we can pinpoint any facet or any part of this, we must discuss it, because there's a story within each of these stories. And not just stories, but lessons that we can share and benefit from and heal. Many of our veterans here need this. And they get it from watching your legacy program. I've been watching your interviews, and they are absolutely spellbinding. The wonderful thing about it is, it doesn't matter who it is, we have commonality. Humanness. Humanness is one commonality. That's a bit general and vague. But when we start talking about those actual things, like standing in the queue for lunch with your varpan, or like me, trying to get into the front of the queue so they can have lunch, and then quickly run around to the back of the queue so they can have lunch again, which is what I did. I had an insatiable appetite. Well, of course, with all this training and running, I think we were hungry boys, eh?
And people were burning a lot of energy during basic.
Yes, absolutely. We must. It wasn't just, yes. Well, this is the thing that upset me so much, is I looked at later years, when was I there? 79, 80 was like beginning years. And the training was super rigorous. And till the parents, quite rightly, the parents and the mothers and the human rights groups stepped in. And they said, no, hey, these guys can't go running around for 3 days with 1 liter of water. If they're lucky, they had to go running with water bottles strapped to their waist. I'm just giving you an example that, without any doubt, as the war progressed, I won't say the intensity of the war got less, but we got wiser. I've heard people say, work smart, not hard. And that's what I think our leader groups realized, that messing us up, buggering us up like this was not as productive as treating us more humanely and more intelligently. And that's what happened over those 10 years, from 79 to 89. Leader group came full circle. And by the time it's 89, they were all had long hair. We never had hair longer than this on 79, 80. No, we would never get away with it. But I look at photographs of the consequent years, and they're all long hair, and they had proper pass time. They went away on pass on regular weekends. Pass was a very rare episode for us. It was a hard deficiency that we had to endure. Living so far away, Bloemfontein is not so far from Cape Town, but it was far. And it was hard to be away from the family and at war, especially if we were under going to the border and undertaking such dangerous operations. Families were, quite rightly, understandably, apprehensive. And like in any war, Mum is always waiting there, hoping not to get that letter or the dominie to come up to your house and say sorry. And those were the years that our military took I think our training, our strategy, in many ways on the battlefield and in the training ground took a huge turn for the better. We learned a lot. I think we also communicated a lot of our knowledge and experience to Australia and the UK. They learned from us and still do. So we're proud. We're proud of what we achieved. We're proud of the lessons that we were part of. And we're proud, most proud of those that made the biggest sacrifices.
I cannot
And,
agree more with you. And I think
yeah.
what we should do is we should ask the viewers here, even have specific questions on a subject, state them here below, and we can get
I
you
would love to.
to just expand on it, because the story is actually not told here. This is the bare basics. But if somebody wants to contact you to come and tell the story, say at the church or at anywhere, can they do that?
I love it. Absolutely. I've done it a few times. It was quite nerve-wracking in the beginning. I had some, what was the worst one? A woman's interest group. And well, that was more to do with motivation and I would say enduring hardship and challenges and perseverance, you know. And that's what it boils down to. How we can grow from our hardships, persevere, and what's the word? And win out at the end. Bigger, better, stronger. As I said, the more severe the suffering and the hardship, the more the growth. And I by no means have suffered, but as I say, I've been given a taste of much suffering and much hardship and much sadness. I've been given, can I say, comfortable amounts, endurable amounts. Thank God, you know, that it wasn't, that I haven't lost my legs and whatever, like these other brave, suffering, long-suffering others have done. I'm still in one piece, but I'm witness, Chris, and so grateful to have had this knowledge, this experience, this opportunity to participate, to suffer, and to grow. For me, this has been, they say, oh, how can you say it's an adventure? It is life's an adventure in all its components. Life is an adventure. An adventure doesn't mean fun and games. An adventure means something that you're not going to expect and something new every day. And that's what it was for us. Unexpected, new, and not always easy. But whichever way it goes, to some level or some degree, it was growth. And that's why I'm so grateful today to have had all that and still be here today in one piece, happy, healthy. I don't know about happy, but healthy and older, wiser, and grateful, of course. So grateful. Gratitude is my hugest, biggest lesson in this entire journey. Just gratitude, simple. Being grateful for everything. Everything that's happened, bad, good, and everything in the middle. So yes, I would be very happy to take questions and to discuss details or so much that I've left out here. There's so much more. I keep looking to the side here because I got a whole lot of stuff which I've collected over the years, and that's been in the suitcase or under the stairs or in the roof. That has been swept under the carpet. We aren't doing that. We're not trying to raise dead ghosts. We're just here to acknowledge some great people and some really worthwhile lessons that are just as relevant today as they will be in 20 years or 30 years' time. And that is your legacy. Your legacy is the most apt description of our goal and our directive here. And to give them a legacy, to give us all a legacy, we need to do this. I've written a book, actually. I've got my book here, but I've taken it to 2 publishers, and it had too many names and legal loopholes that would threaten its ability to publish. And they said, no, do this, do that, do that. It was such a huge job to change everything. And while I was changing everything, I noticed there was stuff that I didn't like, stuff actually that I couldn't tell, or stuff that would not be wise to spread around, or stuff that I'd left out. And now all of a sudden, this book, which I was supposed to publish 2 years ago, is still sitting on my desk here, begging for me to sit down and get through it. But after I've read through it about 20 times, it's a big job, as you would probably know. But it encompasses a lot of what we've spoken about today, the lessons and the benefits and the applause, the awards, the accolades, and the commonalities of so many people. I mentioned earlier, this is not about me. It's a huge combination of events and people. And every one of us has got a place here. Every one of us has got a part in my story. And it's been such fun putting it together. Difficult and complicated, because it is a complex issue. It's like a web of networks. It's a network of people and events and achievements. And I have put this together in a book, and I'm dying to get it out. I don't expect people to buy it. I would hopefully just be able to give it away or charge a small amount. I have a co-editor who might and would probably deserve a small royalty or fee from it. I don't think it'll sell much. I think I'm looking at my other colleagues here many of them veterans who've written books, and they do quite well out of them, actually. I've never read one. I've never read one of these books. I've skimmed through a couple of pages and seen it all in a page. You know what I mean? Which is sad because it's so vital or relevant to my experiences that I should have read these things, and I should have read all the Rattle books and all the whatever, but I haven't. And I think possibly it was because I have an aversion to seeing deeper into the suffering and the trials of all these others. And it will be the same for them with me, I think. You know, the suffering and the trials that we've been through, and I'm just putting it down onto paper, but mine have all got a victory afterwards. Mine have all, don't just end on the suffering and the pain and the misery of war. Mine have all got a big smile at the end. Even to the guys that died, my very good friends. Today I held their hands every day and I smile with them. They're safe. Things were different. But we owe them this accolade. We owe them an eternal accolade, not just for their lives, but because of the way they were taken. Well, look at the farm murders today. That's far worse. You know, the more dying in farm murders than were ever died in our battle conflicts. It's not the same thing, I know, but the trauma, the horror, the unnecessary hatred and sadness is worse. Do you know about the farm murders? I don't suppose you do much about that, but it is a horror of massive proportion.
Of course, I know about them, and I also know the theories behind them. And we are trying to get hold of detectives to speak to us here on Legacy to tell us whether the theories behind them are conspiracies or the truth, which is a subject for another day. But I can tell you two good things, two good news. I've written many books, dozens.
Yeah.
And I've spoken to many soldiers of our office, and all of them tell me the same story. That the publishers will do them in. Now, I'm not saying every single one, but as a legal man, I can tell you I actually do read contracts. And I actually do understand what I'm reading. And I've chased some of the biggest publishers in the world, all the way back to the UK, and told them to stop their contracts so deep up, you know where. Because they're one-sided and they plain out rubbish, they will do you in. So at Legacy, we decided, since we have Legacy books as well, where we review books and where we try to assist the authors, not a publisher. No publisher is welcome here. Let me swing my finger like Pierre Bourtal once.
No, good. I agree. It's from what I've seen.
Because they do cheat people. And again, I'm not saying everybody, but if you want to sue me, come. I will sue you back. So we are going at Legacy in the next month or two, going to have an entire series on how to write the book, how to publish that book, and how to make sure that you actually get at least a bit of money out of it. It's not about money. I can tell you.
No, it's not about...
I've never
It's not about the money. For me, it's not the money. I said, I don't want any of the money. If it goes to my co-editor, he can have it all. It's about vindication. It's about, freeing my heart, sharing the load so that I don't have to sit with all the stuff inside my head, so that there are others I know who have exactly the same things and we can relate to each other so well. And it's so great and reassuring to find one of the same. I met a civil engineer yesterday who came into my house. He wanted to get his solar system set up. And he came and he asked me about the inverters and I showed him my stuff. And we got talking. He worked in the same engineering company as I worked in Pretoria for about 10 years. I never got to know him, but I know his name. I realized, and we started talking about different projects and how each of us had contributed to these massive infrastructure projects in South Africa, and how proud we were to have been the builders of this nation. We are literally the builders of the nation. But sorry, why I'm digressing like this is we found a commonality, which was so exciting. I made a friend for life now, but it was so great to find somebody that was on the same page with you at that time. And this is the same with us as veterans. We have this commonality in so many ways and so many fields of pride, great achievement, and all those little detailed memories. And for us, it's a great reward, I think. It's a reward to come across and to meet friends that are on the same page in whichever field it may be, whether it's as a military veteran or, like I said, as a professional civil engineer or whatever, you know, in our fields of expertise. And it's been an honor to, it's always a great experience to meet up with somebody on the same page. That's what I'm saying. And this is what we are doing here. We'll meet more, and we'll meet those. When I read your book, and I'll read your book. I'll read it from page to page and carefully too. Not with critical views, but with appreciation of commonality. And that's my word for today. Two words: commonality, gratitude.
Well, Internet, we've come to the end of this video. I assure you there's going to be more videos with our friend Gareth. He's a wise man. You know, I sat here listening to him and I thought to myself, this is not the usual stuff. This is actually a wise man speaking based on experience. He'll try to deny it. We know how he is. But you know what? We know the truth. And I want to say to all of you, come and tell your story to us. By speaking to us, you're healing yourself, and it will help you to do so. When we speak to our friend Frans van Staden, our legacy psychologist, the former 3rd Battalion commander, he's got a system. He worked out a system, not him himself, but he's using a system where he can assist you within 2 or 3 times of meeting him. He can turn all these negative, horrible thoughts in your head around. It's proven. I've seen it happen. I'm seeing it done with people.
Yeah.
So I will ask you, please contact us. If you can't afford Frans, he'll help you for free. That is a wonderful thing about meeting people at Legacy. There's lots of good people out there, and they do want to assist you. So don't let people tell you you were not important, that you were just a troopie, or you were just whatever at the GB. I don't want to hear such nonsense. You were important. You did your duty. Gareth explained exactly to you why you did it, how you did it, and what came from it. It's not our fault what happened later. I'm not going to take responsibility for what happened after 94. There was great opportunities for everyone, and some people didn't use that opportunities for everyone. They used it for themselves. And that is as political as I can get on this show without being banned.
Yes.
So until we meet again, God bless.
Thank you.